Hey everyone, it's Courtney and my presentation is on behavioral economics and financial behavior and young adults' financial wellness. So a brief overview on behavioral economics. It is an approach to understanding decision making and behavior that integrates behavioral science with economic principles. So behavioral economics is this umbrella of approaches that borrow from social sciences, different research and styles and approaches from social sciences like psychology, sociology, behavior analysis, and it seeks to, account for relevant features of human behavior that might be missing in just standard economics frameworks. And of course, it relies on empirical findings, just like behavior analysis. So specifically in this presentation, we're going to talk about financial saving. There has been a sharp decline in rates of financial savings, specifically in the United States over the past 50 years. A statistic I have for you is that the rate of national saving per year in the United States has declined from 8.3% in 1980 to 1.8% in 2003. So there's a widespread need for strategies to stimulate saving or thrift. These low rates of saving per household has created concern over investment, balance of payments, loans, mortgages, things like that, and overall financial security. And we'll talk about the ways that we might be able to generate saving a little bit later. I am just going to give a brief overview on these two theories or models of saving that have really dominated the conversation throughout the 20th century. Again, this is just really brief. I don't think it'll do a lot to our conversation to go into them in a lot of depth right now. So I'll start with the life cycle hypothesis, and this was introduced in 1954. So this states that wealth, the way that we look at our wealth, is divided into three mental accounts. The first is current income, the second is current assets, and the third is future income. So there's the temptation to spend is assumed to be greatest in current income and least in future income. The second perspective I have to talk about here is the neoclassical perspective, and this is what a lot of you probably think of when you think of economics. It focuses on supply and demand as the driving force behind the production, pricing, and consumptions of goods and services. And this assumes that people make appropriate decisions provided that they are well informed. And there are some issues with these two models or way that we look at behavioral economics. The first, the life cycle hypothesis, does not really account for sudden or predictable changes in consumption throughout the lifetime. One of the greatest examples that was given was retirement. The consumption declined sharply at retirement when households experience this predictable decline in disposable income. And because this income is predictable, people tend to save or accumulate less for retirement, which leads to a larger decline because of this sudden and surprising decline in disposable income. Another example would be early retirement. Some people go into early retirement due to surprising reasons like disability. think that they're really going to retire at this age, but now they are, and now it's even more surprising. So this life cycle hypothesis doesn't give us a lot of insight into these sort of sudden changes. Now, for the neoclassical perspective, it does not adequately consider private markets disseminating financial information more effectively than government institutions. So we think of where we get our information on finances. Me specifically, I see a lot on the TV during commercials. I see a lot on social media through ads, on the radio. So am I getting my information from these private markets that have something to gain, or am I getting it through government-funded institutions? So what's coming into question is that well-informed, and well would be in quotation marks. What does well mean, and is that really happening? And just most people are not equipped to engage in life cycle planning without assistance. Talk about that in a second. So let's talk about the problem of financial literacy in the United States right now. People who are less financially literate tend to save less. And most people rely on information and advice from parents, relatives, friends, or just personal judgment. A very small percentage of people are going to professionals, financial advisors, and seeking those few sit-down meetings to plan for their financial future. And the average cost or fee of sitting down with a financial planner would be $100 to $300 per hour. So that's really not happening, and people are relying on their personal judgment or their friends' personal judgment, who themselves might not be financially literate. So how can behavior analysis help the financial literacy problem, specifically in the United States? Well, first let's talk about what we know. So we know that saving reflects a decision to accept a lower level of consumption at one point in time in exchange for a higher level of consumption in another. And does this sound familiar? It should, because it sounds to me like delay discounting. So what we know of delay discounting, that it's the depreciation of the value of a reward related to the time that it takes to be released. And delay discounting can be used as a measure of self-control and impulsivity. High rates of delay discounting found in individuals willing to wait for greater rewards after a period of time, where low rates of delay discounting are found in individuals who are not willing to wait and who are willing to take that smaller reward immediately. And there are a couple different definitions or different things that we can focus on when we talk about delayed discounting. What we're going to talk about now is the depreciation of the subjective value of a consequence when it's delayed. So how much value does retirement have to myself, who is 25 years old? Very little value. I think about it very, very little, which probably isn't great, which is part of this problem. But that's what we're going to be talking about, and this is what we want to know. And delay discounting has been crucial in understanding the decision-making processes in daily financial situations. So talking about delay discounting, let's talk about the role of cues and cognitive processes that affect delay discounting. So we know that cognitive loads affect self-control. I'm going to talk about a study by Shiv and Federican in 1999. So let's talk about this study. There were two groups of participants. One group was asked to memorize a 2-digit number, while the other group was asked to memorize a 7-digit number, and then to report that number in a different room. But before they went into that other room, they were asked to choose between a chocolate cake or a fruit salad. And what they found was the individuals that were asked to memorize the 7-digit number were roughly 50% more likely to choose the chocolate cake as opposed to the fruit salad. So self-control requires cognitive effort and becomes more difficult when cognition is engaged in other tasks. Additionally, let's talk about cues. So the same researchers did the very similar study, almost the exact same study. However, they changed the procedure from those individuals who had memorized the 2-digit or 7-digit number. Instead of choosing between a piece of chocolate cake and a fruit salad that were directly in front of them, they chose based on two pictures that were in front of them. So no longer were they looking at an actual piece of chocolate cake or an actual fruit salad. They were looking at pictures of those objects, and what they found was that 50% more difference basically was eliminated, and that less visceral cue of having a piece of chocolate cake in front of you gave them more self-control, and they were able to make a better decision of taking the fruit salad, even with that 7-digit number in their head. So what about young adults specifically, and financial savings? Basically, there's very limited research for studying financial behavior of young adults. Young adults are faced with many financial choices, like credit cards, taking out loans, beginning to be a homeowner and, starting a mortgage on a house, putting a down payment on a house, retirement and investment opportunities. These are all things that choices that young people are faced with. And we already know that people need adequate information or knowledge to make effective decisions to ensure short and long-term financial wellness. And what research has shown us, what research there is that young adults are generally not financially literate. I will talk about a study by Rutherford and Fox that assessed young adults' financial wellness, and this was in 2010. The study was done by disseminating surveys online to young adults. So what the researchers were looking at was overall financial wellness. And this is the definition that they came up with for financial wellness. So having an active state of having financial health that is demonstrated by having low debt level, high and active savings and or retirement plans, and following a spending plan. And they also talked about financial behavior, which is a manner in which consumers operate economic aspects of their lives. So good financial behavior would be effectively using your income and credit, having good payment practices, and investing in the future. So these are what the authors looked at, and we'll talk about the results from this study. So what Rutherford and Fox found were that slightly over half of young adults in the U.S. do not have enough cash on hand to pay for household expenses for 2.5 months if there was a sudden loss of income. Additionally, 35% of young adults do not understand the complications to financial wellness if they do not pay credit card balances at the end of every month. So that's just not known. There's a lack of financial literacy when it comes to credit cards. And that 45%, so almost half of the young adults surveyed, did not make financial future plans longer than about a year. So when we look at saving for retirement, half of young adults are not planning for retirement. Half of them aren't even planning for a couple years ahead. They're planning for a year or less. So based on what we learned and what we know, what are the implications for behavioral economics? So we know that self-control is difficult and that the cues that we see on a daily basis, the ads, different marketing strategies, and the cognitive processes that we are taking on, they affect our financial decision making. And we know that financial literacy is key for having good financial behavior and for having financial wellness. The education is the most important. So some implications are, should we begin mandatory high school courses on financial literacy? My high school had a finance course that was optional, and I know a couple people who took it. It was known as the joke course in our high school. So should that option of taking a finance course become mandatory, where we can learn financial literacy at a young age? Also, should we look into more resources for employees, for young adult employees? So employers who generally have a young adult population of workers, should they be giving out more resources and more information on the options, the financial options and resources that are available to their employees? So these are all just some basic applications that we can talk about a little more if you're interested. But other than that, that's it for the applications. That's all for the presentation. So thank you for listening. Bye-bye.